Welcome to Time to Teach with Tammy, the podcast that gives tips, advice, and suggestions to teachers by a real teacher. So sit back and enjoy. And oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. And we're back. Welcome to episode 63 of Time to Teach. Today's episode is entitled Contributing to a Positive Work Environment. And you'll notice the title, I use the word contributing instead of maybe creating a positive work environment, because as I was thinking of an appropriate title for the show and some of the points that I wanted to be sure to include, I started to think about how it's not just one person. So you can't really go at this yourself. There are things that you can do to help create the environment, but it really takes all the persons involved that is going to create the culture and create the environment. So that's when I decided contributing to a positive work environment is probably the best title, because it most accurately describes what we're doing. We're contributing, we're doing our part. That's going to help create that positive environment, but it's not just one person involved in this. It really takes everyone involved. So of course the implication there is that you could be doing these things and perhaps the work environment still is not necessarily positive, and I totally agree with that. But then I would revert to the saying, be the change you seek, or be the change you'd like to see. And that's all we can do. We can just promote those ideas that we feel are important and valuable and hope that others pick up on it. At the end of the day, we cannot dictate the actions of others. We're really only in control of ourselves. So, boy, that was a lot to kind of explain contributing to a positive work environment. So yes, pretty self-explanatory. We are just going to be discussing today some of the things. This probably will not be an exhaustive list of different things that we can do to help create a positive environment, but definitely some of those things. So at the time that I'm recording, I am right at the beginning of a school year. I've gone, I think I've been back about a week and a half. We started with some training, some leadership training, and then this past week has been, a few workshops. I have 3 new teachers on my team, so a lot of what I've been doing is meeting with those new teachers, kind of getting them orientated with the curriculum and a little bit about what our grade level looks like. So all of that kind of stuff, and obviously setting up my classroom. So that's what my week and a half has looked like. So Monday I go back and I will be meeting with the parents. So I'm right at the beginning of a school year, and as such, I naturally started to think about the work environment. So I'm not talking about classroom environment. This is nothing about what happens in our classroom. Those are great conversations, and I have actually touched on that before and probably will again in the future. But I'm speaking directly about the actual work environment. So yes, I just started kind of thinking about the work environment and just how so very important that environment is. It can promote health and wellness in teachers and staff, or it could do the opposite. depending on the kind of work environment you find yourself. So just to briefly kind of say what I already have said, we cannot control the actions of others. That's out of our hands. Yes, we can do things to positively influence the actions of others, but in terms of actually controlling certain factors, we absolutely can't. We're only in control of ourselves, and that's the best that we can do. So let me continue then with some of the points that I have kind of laid out, factors that I feel are very important and will help as you are working towards contributing to a positive work environment. So, number one, if you hear noise in the background, it's my cat. I tried to lock her out of the room and she was not having that. So, to avoid any cat destructiveness happening, I let her in. So you might hear her. It's just Pepper, my cat. Okay, so number one is very obvious, and it's just trying to maintain a positive attitude. And I don't mean, when I say maintaining a positive attitude, that doesn't mean that you have to be super, super happy or super, super bubbly all the time. It's just, having that good, healthy, positive attitude. Instead of having an attitude of everything, like the Eeyore, I always think kind of like, that kind of, everything's wrong. Everything is seen as half empty. We have the choice to see things as half empty or half full. And that's where I think the positive attitude comes in, is, not everything is quite a tragedy unless we make it that way. Not everything is the end of the world unless we make it that way. So we want to, and this is for our own health as well, not just the environment, the work environment around us, but I think you will see by implementing and maybe embodying some of these characteristics and habits, it is going to help you with your own mental health and your wellness. So, just kind of maintaining that positive attitude, showing it, expressing it. And in that way, I think we can spread a positive attitude. You know how people's whole kind of, the way they are can influence others. Like if you have an attitude that's positive and upbeat, other people feel that way when they're in your presence. The same is true if you are someone who, has an attitude of, everything is wrong, woe is me, just more on the negative side. Well, that also affects those around you. They start to feel that as well, and it just doesn't feel very good. So, positive attitude. Number two, some of these things you might, if you've listened to previous episodes, especially ones on, being a leader and different kinds of attitudes, some of these are overlapping somewhat because they fit in other categories. They don't necessarily fit in just one thing. So this is something I've talked about a lot, but being solution oriented. In fact, when we were in our grade level leader meeting this last week, I don't know why this week I keep thinking like, 2 weeks ago. No, it's only been a week. We were discussing our norms for our meetings. Like, what are the kind of norms that we expect in our grade level leader meetings? What is the kind of communication we want to have with each other? And this is one of the things that I put forth on the table because I find it goes with having a positive attitude, but when you are solution oriented, it's, instead of just criticizing and looking at everything that's wrong, okay, let's look at how can we fix this, or what would be a possible solution, or what could we try. It's fine to have healthy criticisms. I think that is exactly how we grow. So it's not about accepting the status quo. It's not about accepting things as they are, even when it's perhaps not the best, or it's just simply no longer working. Maybe it worked before, but that's no longer the case. It's about instead of just complaining, maybe bringing what is not working to the table with a possible solution or possible solutions. Otherwise, it's just complaining, and that's not healthy. So let's be solution oriented. Number 3, listen. I've said this many times, but I feel it's so important to be a listener. Really, in any situation, this is going to help. When you really listen and you listen to understand what the concern is, what the complaint is, what the situation is, because a lot of times we assume that we understand a situation. We do this with our students as well, and it is something. I have a new TA, and I've talked to her already about how it's really important that we listen to our students to understand, because it's easy to see one thing happen and then you assume you know everything about the situation. Or you assume that you know the best solution without actually truly hearing what happened. I've been guilty of that, absolutely, for sure. So listening to really truly understand, and not just, sometimes when you're in conversations, I have been guilty of this, where I'm listening, but I'm listening so I can I just want to say my response. That's not truly listening to understand. If you're just waiting so that you can get your next word in, it's important that we're listening to understand and then make our next response based on what the other person has said, but not just I'm waiting for my turn to say what I want without really listening to what you're saying. Number four is think about your response. So this really goes to what I just said, listening to understand. However, this could be, let's say this could possibly be something, maybe it was an email that you received. So it's not necessarily during a real time, as it happens conversation, though it could be. But let's say we receive an email about something. Sometimes we're like, oh, I have something to say about that. I think it's better when we take our time, we think about our words, we think about the situation. I don't know how many times in emails I kind of skimmed something and then I reread it and was like, oh, I completely misunderstood, because, and this is probably specific to me. I do a lot of skimming and I keep needing to work on that. I'm still needing to work on that because I'm still guilty of that. I think because time is so limited, I resort to that, but I need to actively work on it. I keep saying I need to do it, but I haven't actively worked on it, which is why I'm not improving. But I will skim things and then I miss things, and then that means I've misunderstood, I misread it. And it's only when I go back and I'm like, oh boy, I missed like a huge piece of this. I am really good about being careful in my responses anytime. I'm a very conscientious person, in that I think that's because I can overly analyze things that happen. So I like to think about it. So I am good, at least in doing that. But yeah, it's really important that you kind of take time to respond. A lot of times, we will not necessarily have the answer immediately, and it's okay to respond, to say, oh, let me have a little time to really think about this, and then I'll get back to you, because we don't want people to feel that they're being put off. That's not a good feeling. It's really good to acknowledge people, especially when they have requests or they're in need of something. It's really important to, it's courteous, it's respectful, just, oh yeah, I saw that you're asking this, I just, I have this going on, or I just need a little time to think about it and I will get back to you. And then just make sure you do. Don't put someone off and make them think you're getting back to them and you don't. That's equally not good. So yeah, just, really think about your response. Don't just respond on whim. Number 5, we hear this all the time, attitude of gratitude. This is one of those things that I feel like can be so overused, just like growth mindset, if you don't stop to really think about what it means and implement it. Because I think we, as in we educators and we as probably just humans, hear terms being used and, the jargon in whatever career and profession that you find yourself in, which I realize the audience, this will be specific to teaching, but it's just kind of human nature. You hear the jargon, you pick up the jargon, you use the jargon, but do we really understand what the jargon means, and are we really using it? Are we just spitting back what we hear? So attitude of gratitude is one of those things that we say, we hear, but are we actually implementing it? And that's what the difference is. So, when I am exercising an attitude of gratitude, I'm really stopping and being mindful about those positive things, the great things that are happening in my life, in my work day. Maybe there are some irritating things going on and I can hyper focus on that. And right now I mean I in the general sense, which is super specific and not general, right? Pertains to me only. But when I'm saying I right now, I mean all of us do that, right? We can hyper focus on those things that are going wrong. So that's kind of easier to do than focusing on the things that are going right, because when something is going right, it doesn't call as much attention to us as the things that go wrong. So we kind of forget about those wonderful positive things that we should be grateful for, because they're so much easier to overlook than those negatives. So, I woke up today. That is a huge positive. There are many people out there who unfortunately did not get the opportunity to wake up today. So I'm very grateful to have another day to be me, to be a learner, to be all the things that I am in my life, to be able to continue my own journey on just self-improvement and improving, the lives around me. I do that through my work as a teacher. I have talked about that. I find my line of work very rewarding because we are really impacting lives. And that's how I honestly feel about educators. We have a huge job. We have such an important job, and I'm so thankful for that. I have water, fresh drinking water, that is available to me right here. It's easily accessible. My husband made me a cup of coffee this morning. I did not have to do that myself. I'm very grateful for that. So there's so many things that, if we stop to think about, there are really good things going on in our lives. That is going to make the difference. So I would encourage everyone that in your work environment too, think about those things like, maybe so-and-so smiled and said hi. That was very nice of so-and-so. Whatever it is, it could be the littlest things to the big things, but I would encourage looking at those small things, because we're not going to have these huge, wonderful things every single day. It's really all of those little things combined. It's more like the aggregate positive things happening that we can overlook, that we should be grateful for. If you're listening to this, well, maybe not all of us, but we have those of us who have a teaching job or have any job. We are very fortunate to be in that situation. That's a reason to be grateful. So just finding those things and really being mindful about remembering them, because like I said, it's so easy to overlook them. They can be overshadowed by negative things, if we allow them. That's our choice. It's totally up to us. Okay, number 6. Number 6 is genuine appreciation of colleagues. This is not like fake appreciation. This is not, just looking for something to appreciate. This is actual genuine appreciation, but also expressing it. So, maybe a colleague said something in a meeting that you really appreciated. You can let that colleague know, I really liked your comment, or I really like whatever point you brought up, whatever it is. Maybe it's an activity that a colleague shared, or a lesson idea, and just, really making sure that you express your appreciation for what that person did. Sometimes we feel that way, hopefully more than sometimes, but I feel we often will experience those moments where, like, oh yeah, I'm so happy that this happened, or very appreciative, but we don't always let the other person or persons involved know about it. But it is hugely important. I always try to make a habit of things, especially if it's like a staff development or something that was planned for us. And if it's something I felt really worked, I always try to give that feedback to the organizer, because I think a lot of times they don't always, unless there's a survey that's being sent out specifically asking for feedback, they don't always know, is that something that the staff liked? Did they actually enjoy that? Did that work? So I always try to give feedback in that sense and let them know, like, I really appreciated the way you did this, or you thought about that, so that people know. And of course, when they know that something's working, they'll continue it. Whereas if they don't know that anyone liked it or appreciated it, they probably will not, or they won't necessarily implement it again. They might, but they don't know that it's something that was very well received. So yeah, and that's just one example, but I think it's important that we show appreciation when it's appropriate, when it is true, and yeah, just making a habit of that. Okay, number 7. Number 7 is thinking in terms of a community. So even though as teachers, I know we often feel we're in our own little silos, and we, there is a point that we're kind of cut off. I'm very fortunate because I have a TA, and I have had a TA for so long now that I'm thinking that in the future, if I'm ever in a position where I don't have a TA, I wonder how that, I bet that's going to feel a little bit different and more silo-ish, because I am so used to having another adult in the room. But for the most part, we are in our own worlds. We do have limited contact with our colleagues, so it's a different kind of environment, as we educators are very well aware of. But it's important to know that regardless of that, we are a community. Our school is a community. Our grade levels are communities. So we are we and we are us. It's not just what works for me. It's really thinking about the entire community. And instead of just me, this works for me, or this is good for me, keeping everyone in mind. And I think that promotes a certain sense of, respect to others as well. I'm very fortunate because this has been a conversation at our school right now. We're going through, I think I've mentioned this before, but we are training under Marzano, well, not under Bob Marzano necessarily, but we are doing a 2-year PLC. So we have a representative, I cannot remember his name right now. Maybe I'll try to find his contact information and link him in the show notes. If I remember, I will probably forget. But anyway, so we are training. It's going to be a 2-year PLC, and one of the things that just with all the new directions that we're going, we've just been very, I guess, intentional, school-wide and section-wide, talking about that we really want to be thinking about all of us, that it's, our students are not just my students, but it's all of us, right? We're all in this together. So it's not, if my students were to fail, it's not just my students that failed, and it's not just possibly me who failed, but all of us. So we're in it together. We're a community. We're looking at ways of success for all of us, because we all are stakeholders in this. It's not just one man or woman for him or herself, but all of us. So this is an attitude that I think is very positive, and it just kind of gets us to think beyond ourselves and what we might typically think is like, oh, my class, my students, they only matter to me. But no, we actually care about everyone and everyone's success and health and well-being. Okay, number 8. So I wanted to throw this in because I don't think we can pretend, well, we can pretend, but I think we should not pretend that everything is always going to go as planned. Everything is going to be easy. That just simply is not the case. So to address that, my point number 8 is embrace challenges. So this doesn't mean I have to get super excited when there's a challenge, but the idea is that anytime there is a challenge, it's important to remember that those challenges are also moments of growth. Personally, I do look forward to challenges. I do like that because I don't like to feel that my growth is for some reason stagnated or not continuing. I am someone who legitimately looks to self-improve and grow. So, I do embrace those challenges. Sometimes it's working with perhaps a student personality or profile that I haven't necessarily worked with or encountered before. So I might find that somewhat challenging, but I always embrace it as an opportunity to learn more about how to work with students. I'll probably get a few new tools in my tool belt that I can keep for, just kind of improving my relationships with students and interactions. So let's see, this year is the first year. Now I'm going into my 7th year at my current school. So this year I am working with SSL and ASAP. So what this is, SSL is like a special Spanish for those students who don't speak Spanish. And then ASAP, I forget the actual acronym, but it's basically those who don't speak English. So similar, but for English. So even though I've been here for 7 years, it's my first time working with this population, because in the past we would have pods of like support service students, and I would always have those pods. So typically if you were a teacher who had a pod of support service students, so those are just students who are receiving extra support, extra academic support, you wouldn't have a pod of support service students and SSL and ASAP students. So I think this is our 2nd year now, 2nd or 3rd, I can't remember quite, but we are no longer doing the pods of support services. We're more spreading them across the grade level classes. So anywho, all of that is to say is why I now have the SSL and ASAP students. And I'm very excited because I feel like that's, I don't know that much about that program. There are actually separate teachers for those classes. So when my class has their regular Spanish time, the SSL will go to their SSL teacher, and then during my English time, my ASAP students are in their ASAP class. It sounds like I'm only with them during math time. This is all new to me. So it's an opportunity to grow. Also because these students will be, I think I have a couple of Japanese students, maybe Korean, couple Koreans, I forget now. I need to look at my list. So it's an opportunity for me to grow. And if you're listening from the States, this might sound odd, especially if you're from California, because that's actually something, it's interesting to me because in California, that's the reality of a lot of your students. They don't understand what you're saying. They don't necessarily speak English and understand English, and they might get a lot of sheltered instruction right in the classroom. In fact, when I went through the teacher credentialing program, I think it had fairly been new that they started to embed CLAD, and I don't remember what that stands for, but it's basically teaching English language learners in a sheltered instruction. So I've actually, when I went through the credential program, that's what I went through. Well, not what I went through, but it was included in the credential. So if you're listening and you're in California, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, that's what we classroom teachers do. And here it's interesting to me because it almost seems like if that's the case, it's just, teachers might be like, oh, I don't understand their language, they don't understand me, so it's a huge challenge. And of course it's a huge challenge, but that's kind of like in California, what we were trained for is working even within the classroom with those kinds of students, because that's the reality in California. We have, and not just California, but we have quite a few students who don't necessarily speak or understand English. So yeah, and all of my students, let's put it simply, all my students are English language learners, because most of them are Mexican students who English is their second language. So let's be clear about that. I've been working with English language learners for my entire time here in Mexico, but it just is that, they would typically speak some English, so in varying levels, but most of them have been at our school since nursery, so they're English language learners, but they would come in with some English. But so this is just kind of an opportunity for me to embrace this challenge, because I've not worked with this population here at this school, so I'm very excited now. And I think that's, when we have challenges like that, don't let those challenges defeat us. Instead, take those challenges and really use them to help us to grow. Okay, so that was number 8, embrace challenges. Number 9, we're getting close to the end here. I didn't even mean to do this, but I have exactly 10 points, so we're almost to the end. Number 9 is cognitive conflict. Now, I had not really heard of this term put that way. I was familiar, more or less with the idea, but not the way the term is phrased. But our Marzano representative, who came to train the leaders that first week when we were back, talked about cognitive conflict. And let me see if I have, I'm not even sure if I have, okay, I do have a definition, so I am reading. I just wanted to be able to maybe lay out more or less what cognitive conflict is. So I'm looking at a website called classroom.synonym.com. There's probably many different ways to define this. I can't even guarantee this is the best way to define it, but it sounds like a very good explanation to what it is. But cognitive conflict is the discomfort one feels when his beliefs, values, or behaviors contradict one another. So this can be cognitive conflict as you're working with a colleague, or there's just something happening that you don't necessarily agree with. Or if you think about something that happens at your school-wide, and it doesn't seem to feel right or be right, or maybe it was something that has happened and it started a long time ago, but maybe it's no longer relevant, or maybe it just doesn't, maybe it's not the best way to do things now because time has, lapsed, and, we know that with lapse of time there's progression and just so many changes. So cognitive conflict really implies a healthy discussion and a healthy challenge of those things. Instead of just accepting status quo, we open up dialogue to question, well, why is that? Is there a better way? In a very respectful way. It does not mean, being disrespectful to others. It does not mean, being rude about it. It just means that, we can question those things in a respectful manner, because that's when growth is going to happen as an organization, as a school, as you work on your grade level teams. Nothing improves if we always accept things. If it's working, that it's not about just challenging for the sake of challenging. If it's working, great. But, we know what the reality is. Sometimes things are happening and it's just because they've always been that way. Maybe there's no real rhyme or reason anymore that it happens that way. So having cognitive conflict, and I think a lot of that is going to be based on the kind of culture at your school. So it's important to contribute to building a culture that is going to be open to that. And again, whenever we're building and creating, promoting, maybe promoting can be done one person, but all these other things, it's really it's all of us together, right? So one person alone probably cannot do it, but one person alone can be the example, or one person alone can light the fire or get things going. So even we want to be aware that a culture and an actual environment takes all of us, but that doesn't mean that we're powerless. We still have to do what we ourselves are empowered to do, what we ourselves are able to do, and understand that is going to affect what's around us, and then maybe there will be a domino effect. But yeah, so cognitive conflict is one of those. Being respectful and getting dialogue going and questioning those things in order to propel things forward, to see growth and see things improve. This is something that I think in the future I'd like to do more of, like a deep dive in conflict, cognitive conflict, because I think it's such a healthy thing, but maybe we don't always know the way to practice respectful cognitive conflict. So I am thinking that will be an excellent topic to look at in depth, probably later, in terms of making it an actual episode. Okay, well, we are now on point number 10. Very similar, but a little bit different. Number 10 is to be willing to have courageous conversations when needed. There will be times when something is going to occur that truly needs to be addressed. So it might be, maybe you don't feel that you're being treated correctly, or there is an issue occurring that is causing conflict between you and someone else. Maybe things are becoming uncomfortable and awkward. Those things are going to happen sometimes. And when it happens, it could be that having a courageous conversation is needed. Now, courageous conversation is not saying that everything needs to be called out. I think courageous conversations are really occurring when there is something truly of need. When I think of when I would have a courageous conversation, it's because something would be jeopardized if I don't. So it's kind of looking at, like, what if I think about how things are going to be in the future, and if I don't have this conversation, is there going to be a very negative impact? Then that would kind of be my guide to having the conversation. Maybe it's a conversation because, like I said, maybe a colleague and I are having differences, but such differences to the point where we really can't get past those differences, and things are feeling awkward and uncomfortable, and we just need to kind of address that and get on the same page and agree that, hey, like we realize we have these differences, but let's just agree to, keep things civil, be respectful, talk out in private when there's something, that we need to address instead of doing it publicly. Whatever it is, there's so many different things that could possibly come up. But this is important because sometimes when things happen, sometimes we just kind of sweep it under the rug and then nothing gets resolved, and then we're left with negative feelings, or we're in a situation where things are not improving. Maybe they're going to become so much worse because it wasn't addressed. I feel like as grade level leader, this is something that really, I have to be able to do because it's more even than just me. I'm working on obviously a grade level team, and I have my whole team to think about, and I have the health of my team. So sometimes that does mean having courageous conversations because, whether it be with administration, if something occurs and my team feels strongly about something and maybe it doesn't feel like a super comfortable thing that to bring up, but because I know that my team feels a certain way, we as a team feel a certain way, then I need to do it, or whatever the situation is. But I feel a huge responsibility that if a need for a courageous conversation occurs, that I have to do it. But you don't have to be a leader of any type. I think as professionals, we have to be willing, especially if you're thinking about how to maintain or help promote a healthy work environment. Part of it is having those discussions that sometimes they don't feel comfortable, but we need to do, and that's because it's going to improve the work environment. It's going to improve our own wellness. For whatever reasons. Just like with point number 9, I think that this also will be, I'd like to do more of a deep dive of what a courageous conversation would look like, when it would happen, all of those fun little tidbits. But, we have to know that sometimes things are going to happen and we're going to have to address them in a very respectful manner. But that's just kind of the way it has to be if we're looking to promote and build a healthy work environment. Okay, you guys, that's it. So those were my 10 little points that I wanted to share with you, and I thought about what exactly would be involved in contributing to a positive work environment. So if you have any tips of your own, I'd love to hear from you. You may tweet to me. I'm on Twitter as at TammyJ123. That's TAMIJ123. Okay, time for our wins and fails segment. So my win for the week, I feel like I've got a few. Obviously, getting my room set up is a huge win. And I must say it's so much more satisfying than taking your room down at the end of a year, boxing everything up. It's just so much more satisfying because you get to set it up and then you enjoy it. You have the whole school year to actually enjoy it. So that is a huge win. I would say the training under the Marzano representative, huge win. It's an ongoing training, so it was just a few days, but it was good. It got me really, really excited about the school year and the things that we're trying, the direction we're taking. So yeah, I'm super, super excited about that. Fail for the week. I think probably it's a similar fail to what everyone experiences when they begin a new school year. I'm super, super excited, but now that I've been back a week and a half, my body is still trying to adjust to getting up at 4:30 in the morning, doing all of the normal school year routines and habits, just getting back into that. My daughter has been gone the whole entire summer. In fact, she just flew in yesterday. She spent the summer in California, so we picked her up last night. And I feel like getting back into, I haven't really been cooking. So getting back into that routine is going to be kind of a curve. So yeah, I would say not a total fail, but I'm just like, starting this week, I'm going to have to be coming back from work, actually cooking a family meal because it's just been my husband and myself, so I haven't had to worry about that. So it's not really a fail, but it does feel like it's going to take a little bit of work to get back into that routine because just thinking of it is making me feel challenged. But that's it. That was it. That's kind of what's going on. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me and being a part of this. I appreciate it because I know there's so many options when it comes to what you listen to in the podcast world. But I thank you once again for joining me on Time to Teach. Until next time.
Wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. Before you go, don't forget you can catch our show notes online at www.timetoteach.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. We're also on Facebook at Time to Teach. Don't forget to check out our Facebook group, Teachers for Effective Curriculum. And if you're an educator with your own podcast show, I invite you to join our brand new Facebook group, Teachers Who Podcast. Let's grow a community where we can network, problem solve, and discuss anything and everything podcast related. I'll see you there.